welcome to the first and only episode of Between Two Nerds. I'm your host, Chris Wyllie.
And I'm your other host, Esteban Ramos.
And today we will be discussing UART and its security flaws.
And we're going to be demonstrating this particular vulnerability using the TP-Link router.
The TLWR841N.
That you can get for $15 on Amazon right now. Now, why is this important? We are on the edge of the Internet of Things revolution. By 2020, there will be over 20 billion devices providing a variety of services worldwide. IoT devices are increasingly being used in daily consumer applications, with modern homes containing many such devices, interfacing with each other, and all of them connected to the Internet. This brings a whole new series of challenges in security, as only one secure device could lead to an entire network being compromised.
So today's exploit focuses on UART, which is a way of sending and receiving data on a circuit board. UART is commonly used in debugging, meaning that it's sending a lot of information that you may not want your consumers to see. This is an issue when companies create a product and they don't disable UART debugging on its production. And in our case, that's what's happened with our router. So imagine a scenario where you're a business owner and you have a couple hundred devices or so that are connected to your network, and all of these are IoT devices with UART enabled. Anybody that has physical access to this port can therefore go in and then receive and transmit any sort of data that they want from that board. They can see the boot cycle, they can even interface with it on a root access shell if it's not set up properly. This is a significant security risk because then once you're connected to the network and you've written your malicious code onto the firmware of the board itself, you can do whatever you want and you can see all of the traffic that you want, assuming that it's a properly insecure board.
Now, you might consider this a risk for having vulnerable IoT devices in public settings. However, this risk is also present when you have full control of who can access the device, like your home, for example. Let's say you are a savvy consumer and decide to buy a used Amazon Alexa through an online marketplace, like eBay. There is nothing suspicious of the seller, and you decide to buy an old first-generation 2015 model that happens to lack current firmware updates and security redesigns. In this scenario, there is nothing that prevents a malicious seller to install malicious software through an unsecure port in the Alexa and getting full access to your home device, and therefore compromising your entire network of IoT devices and perhaps getting private information that you wouldn't want a malicious actor to have.
To start off, we're going to need to gather our materials. We're going to need a router, a screwdriver, a breadboard with our UART to USB adapter, a laptop, and, to make your life easier, a 3-pin header and a soldering iron. Next, we're going to open up our router, but in the interest of time, I've already removed the 2 Phillips screws and popped off the cover. Also, in the interest of time, I've already soldered on our header onto the UART interface, and if I turn this around, you can see that TP-Link has so helpfully labeled these pins with ground, receive, and transmit. Next, we're going to connect it to our UART to USB adapter. We're going to take the receiving, transmitting, and ground wires on the adapter side and connect it to the appropriate pins on the board side. We're going to connect the receiving wire on the adapter side to the transmitter pin on the board side, then vice versa, and then ground to ground. Now, we're connected. Once we've identified the proper pins and connected them to our USB to UART adapter, we need to figure out the baud rate, or the rate at which bits are being sent over the wire. However, in the sake of time, I've already determined this, and it's 115,200 bits per second. There's a list of very common ones on the right side of the screen, so if you don't know your baud rate, just try these out and see which one produces readable text. Finally, we connect the terminal on our laptop to the board on the router via the screen command, which takes 2 arguments. The first is the path to the device that we're connecting to, and this can vary, so try using the command on the screen to find the appropriate path to use. The second argument is our baud rate. Again, if you don't know the baud rate of your device, just run through the list until it works. Once I hit enter, the terminal jumps into a waiting state, and it stays in this state until it receives data from our UART to USB adapter. So once I plug in the power to the router, we should see the boot information, which we do. Once the router is finished booting, we can see that it has dropped us into the shell, and I can see the file structure by typing the ls command. And just to make sure that I'm actually the root user, I can echo user and see that we have root access, allowing us to do pretty much anything that we want to.
The rapid adoption of IoT devices shows no signs of slowing down. This is not a cat you can put back in the bag, so to speak. To really protect against these type of attacks, producers should not release a product with an easily accessible debug port, or should at the very least disable access from these ports in the firmware. For a user, it is also imperative to minimize the risk of these attacks by securing physical access to such devices and minimizing the possibility of using an already compromised device. IoT devices are already significantly vulnerable to an uncountable variety of attacks. Ensuring that physical vulnerabilities are minimized is a problem that can be resolved with improved production standards and practices. How would a manufacturer fix such vulnerabilities?
So if you're a manufacturer of an IoT device with UART for your debugging, what you need to do before it goes out to production is first, disable the UART debugging mode, and second, never ever give the consumer root access on your shell. Thank you for joining us today on our inaugural episode of Between Two Nerds, and thank you, Esteban, for being my co-host today.
Thank you, Chris, for being the host of Between Two Nerds. And just as a reminder, this will be our final episode as well. So don't be expecting any follow-ups because you won't get them.